You know, anniversaries are a funny thing. The older you get, the quicker they come round. And I thought, well, we both thought in this ministry that we'd try and commemorate today, because today is the 70th anniversary of the fall of France. 14th of June 1940, very symbolic day. And it just so happens that a few months ago I was at a local flea market, as you would call it in America, and I came across this very interesting book, Paris Match. And if you can just pan in there, James, you'll see the date is 1964. And really it's a special edition that was put out for the liberation of Paris in 1944. This was to come 4 years after today. But I thought we'd look at this and just do some general commentary. And remember that Paris Match has some of the best photographs ever taken. Excellent photographs. So this ties in very nicely with the anniversary, the symbolic anniversary of the fall of Paris. And boy, didn't it hit the world in 1940. Looking back at some of the newspapers, the American newspapers, Paris falls, all of these things. Songwriters are writing songs about it, long editorials, the end of Western democracy, or so you would think. But it was symbolic that Paris did fall. Now, I just want to start with some pictures here. And here's one of the first ones. Now, there's our friend Uncle Adolf there doing his dance, and I'm not sure whether he's just heard that Paris has fallen and that his troops are marching in. He's certainly not dancing now wherever he is, and I know where he is. He's screaming out in pain. But there he is, he's dancing there. And if you turn the page here, we come to the first of our pictures here. And as I turn it, I think what we have to remember, that even up to the arrival of de Gaulle in 1944, when the city was being evacuated, the Germans were still putting up massive resistance. Now look at this guy in the middle here. Look at the arm around this. He's got a Luger pistol. He's got a Sten gun there, and that looks like a bazooka thrower to me. I'm not quite sure. But this is in Paris, probably a few weeks before the end of the Second World War. The Germans are really putting up a fight there. Amazing photograph, I thought. And if I turn over the pages a little bit more, oh, great picture in the front here. The High Command, look, the German High Command, been arrested by the French resistance, the Maquis, being placed in the Hotel Majestic, waiting to be taken out, checked out, and sent off to different camps, waiting for their punishment, and so it should be. Another interesting picture which caught my eye here was this one. As I say, the fighting continued, and it was quite ferocious. Look at this guy in the middle here, surrounded by French resistance. This is Paris, just a few weeks before the fall. Look at his face there. Looks like he's been through Stalingrad, in fact, doesn't it? Rather than just fighting to hold Paris. Quite a highly decorated office, as you can see there, with his epaulets and so forth there. Interesting picture there. There's some of the French resistance still fighting up on the rooftops, way up on the rooftops there, with guns and arms, firepower, probably provided by us. Looking up there, pointing out Germans still holding out. As I say, this is a few weeks before the fall of France. This is an interesting picture. De Gaulle had arrived in Paris to march to the Notre Dame for a celebration. I mean, the Notre Dame is an occult centre anyway, and gunshots were heard fairly nearby, so everybody threw themselves on the ground, except this very brave Paris Match photographer who stood standing and taking the pictures. Wonderful picture, but that's part of it there then. Another interesting picture of that time there. This guy here, look at the emotion on this guy's face. He's an officer in General de Gaulle's organisation. His name is Gauditz, and he left there apparently in 1940, went to London with de Gaulle, and he comes back on the 18th of June 1945. Home, home at last, he says. Wow, powerful picture. But that's war, isn't it? Now this is an interesting character. This character here, you may well have heard of him, General von Clausewitz, I hope I pronounce his name right. He was the commandant who was in charge of Paris when Hitler said to him, flatten the city, destroy it. And you know what he did? He ignored it. He didn't flatten the city at all. And Paris was never bombed at all, as you can see. That pit still stands there. After the war, he was treated very leniently, and I think he became an honorary member of the resistance and so forth. Another picture which I wanted to pick up here, if I may, and this would be taken during the terrible years of the occupation. And you can see there people being taken out and executed. By then the Gestapo had arrived, and there's a shrine there. Not quite sure where that is, but there's a shrine there. But the picture I did find interesting, the next one I'm going to come to, and you can see I've marked that. Look at these bunch of guys here. Now this tells us here that this is Gestapo headquarters under the command of Karl Oberg and Helmut Nocken, I hope I pronounce it, who are responsible for the death of 253 persons. Can you see that there? Probably a lot higher, that's a conservative figure. And somewhere in that bunch, I suspect, is Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann's lieutenant in this sort of thing, a guy called Theodor Dannecker, and I suspect that the infamous Klaus Barbie is there. That may even be him there, Klaus Barbie. And all these guys were to benefit from the very successful rat run that was put out. Seems to me in those days you had to have a Hitler moustache, can you see it there, to get on. But a bunch of cold-blooded thugs there, and I say Barbie, Dannecker and Eichmann may well be there. The whole thing is that Paris certainly went through it. But the fall of Paris, 14th of June 1940, and that's the famous picture. Everybody's seen this. You've seen the newsreel film of the crack troops marching down the Champs-Élysées, gentleman on a horse there, crowds on either side. They're not waving, are they? Can you see the crowds behind the horses' feet? They're looking very glum, very sullen. They know what's going to come there. Historic photograph. And of course, soon after that, Hitler arrived in Paris to sign the treaty in the carriage where the treaty had been signed in 1918 in the Vichy Forest. So there's some pictures from there. Now what I'm saying is that terrible times, but the war did come to an end. So what happened at the end of the war? Europe was divided up, and what came into us was what we call the common market. As I was a young man, it was called the common market, then it became the EEC, now it's the EU. There was nothing original about this idea. Hitler in the 30s had been calling for a one world order, a one world government, one world currency and so forth. He was even talking about banning smoking and smoking cigarettes in bars and cafes and restaurants, but he said never catch on. What do you think of this? That's a poster from 1940 and it proclaims one people, one nation, one leader. What does that sound like to you? That sounds like the one world order to me. At the moment we have three powerful blocs. We have the American bloc, the EU, we have the Far East. We believe at this ministry one day the Antichrist will come along and he'll take on all this and he will be that one leader. This man saw himself in that role, but he was just a precursor to the Antichrist who was coming. Even then, folks, they were talking about the one world order. Now, 1945, a gentleman by the name of Robert Schuman is given the draft to get a confederation of states together to build this European network. Germany's in there, France is in there, I believe the Benelux countries are in there as well. Britain wasn't in there. Churchill decided he didn't want it, Clement Attlee decided he didn't want it as well. But out of this came, within 5, 6, 7 or 8 years, the Treaty of Rome and Bilderberg. There's a little book here, just picked up, Nick Harding's Secret Societies. There you can see the Masonic apron there, square and compass, the all-seeing eye which is on the dollar bills and so forth. And he doesn't say a lot about secret societies here. You can just see on the back there, you can see most of the secret societies that we know. But I was particularly interested in the Treaty of Rome, there, Rome again you see, because when Robert Schuman set this up, the signing was done in Rome. The Treaty of Rome was signed in Rome. But he had a little bit of problem getting the whole thing off the ground. He gave that famous remark, do you remember? He said, we must get the whole thing going. We'll work with anyone. Yes, even the devil himself. Robert Schuman said that. Even the devil himself to get the EU off the ground. And do you know what? The Vatican are planning to make him a saint at the moment. He's having the process of canonisation made. Nick Harding's little book says here, if I can just go to page 32, the Treaty of Rome, which created the common market, both Gulf Wars, had their genesis within the secret organisation, and the French complained that the Bilderberg had interfered with the politics of French government in the 1960s. Did you know that both Gulf Wars were the result of the Treaty of Rome and the common market and Bilderberg? Heavy, heavy stuff. All anniversaries have to be looked at, but I think this is an important one. Not so much because it was the second year of the war. England was alone then. Dunkirk had just fallen. But the plans were being laid for a one world order, a one world government, which we say one day will be headed by the Antichrist. Very, very, very soon. So from this ministry, a little walk down memory lane of the liberation of Paris, 1940. Maranatha and bonsoir.